No country for old white men at college. Next on Campus Roundup. Hey, I'm Dr. Duke, and this is the Campus Roundup at the College Fix. Our top story segment this week focuses on removing white male authors from the canon. To talk more about this, we welcome Zachary Schmidt, a political science and public relations major at Western Washington University and a journalist at the College Fix. Zach, you've done a really good article here about the continuing saga at Reed College about how certain group, a really small group of protesters want white authors purged from a particular class. Give us a little background on what's happening at Reed.
Yeah, so there is a group on campus at Reed University called Readers Against Racism. They wanted to see more implementation of non-white authors into the class curriculum in Humanities 110, which is a required course for every freshman to take. At first, they gave in by they added they added Harlem and Mexico City, but they wanted more implementation of non-white authors.
Something you said I think is really interesting. You said that from the moment these protesters started to protest, this is a basic Western Civ course, right? A mandatory Western civilization course that freshmen take. Pretty unremarkable. We shouldn't be surprised in a Western Civ course that there are a lot of ancient historical people that we would theoretically call white. But it seems like Reed College surrendered right away. You're telling me that they actually allowed students to sit in on these classes as a form of silent protest while the teachers were trying to teach. Is that right?
Yeah, so at Reed University, there's they encourage protesting or just discussions about things they don't agree with. So they allowed students to sit in on the classes and silently protest. And this went on for all of the academic year 2016-2017. It went on in the first 3 months of the year this year, but it had to end because they were not being silent anymore. There were one or two incidents of where the school had to punish students under some of the rules they violated.
So that's really remarkable. Rather than Reed College stand up to these kids and say, hey, it's one class, right? You can protest it all you want, but we're not going to let you into the class to be disruptive. Reed let those kids into the classroom, these protesters, and utterly predictably, by the end of this experiment, they were disrupting the class.
Yeah, so like the previous classes were not being disrupted to the point where the teachers couldn't teach, but then at the beginning of this year again, the protests were being disruptive of the class, so that is when Reed University decided to end all the protests together in that class.
Well, they ended all the protests because kids were speaking out against the professor in the class, but Reed then promptly turned around and caved in. How did Reed then decide to solve this issue? What did they do?
Well, so every 10 years they have a curriculum review of that class. And it was on the 9th year, so they decided to move that up 1 year based off students' demands or talking with the university. And what they do in this review is they see if the curriculum is meeting the demands of all students. And they decided it wasn't, so they decided to add 2 courses in the back half of the year, second semester, focusing on Mexico City and Harlem content.
Right. So basically, despite the fact that a few of those kids were protested for disrupting class, those kids got their way in the end.
Yeah, but Readers Against Racism would like to see more non-white authors or texts being implemented. They would like to see the first part, which is the usual Mediterranean, ancient Greek curriculum. They would like to see that gone. And they would like to see the addition of Jerusalem and Cairo curriculum added to the humanities class. Right now, they believe that the way the current format for the class is situated, that it's teaching kids the wrong message of teaching people about white culture first is showing a lack of respect for all other white cultures. So they believe that it's not
So in their minds, Jerusalem's not a white culture.
No, apparently not. So.
Okay. Seems to me when you occupy a classroom and then disrupt that classroom, it's a protest. But we appreciate your story. You did a great job. And to read more stories like Zachary's, follow The College Fix on Twitter and Facebook. Zachary Smith, thank you so much for your time today. Time now for Talking Campus, our weekly discussion with members of the College Fix editorial team. Today, I'm joined by College Fix associate editor, Greg Piper, for a conversation about purging white men from the canon. Greg, thank you for being with me again today. And we have a spate of articles that the College Fix has reported on where this seems to be a growing trend now. 18 and 19-year-old kids demanding they don't read the great Western classics because they were written by white males. How do we handle this?
I think one of the things that needs to happen, first of all, is professors need to do a better job of explaining how these writers from hundreds of years ago are actually probing the same territory that a lot of 18 and 19-year-olds are dealing with right now, about romance, about clashes between cultures, about kind of not fitting in a society where you feel marginalized and oppressed there. There's a lot of ways that you can make this really applicable to students. I think probably the best recent example is simply the musical Hamilton. You take something that normally nobody would think of really in the context of kind of being a marginalized person who's suffering in society, who kind of starts at the ground up and works his way to reach the heights of American government. And you make it relevant to these people by showing this is actually your story. It's a lot like you. If you come from a marginalized family, you're trying to rise your way up. You have talent. You act on that talent. You show it. And you eventually accomplish what nobody thinks you can do. And I think that's a really stirring message for students. And it simply takes maybe a little listening on their part and a little patience on the part of their professor to show them that.
Well, as a person who teaches Shakespeare, Renaissance literature, and the classics, the heartbreaking thing to me is this is exactly right. The very stories that they're saying they shouldn't have to read, the very great books that they're rejecting now, books that they haven't read, books that they know nothing about, that these books speak to them, that the reason we still read these books 400 years after Shakespeare's been dead is because there's much in Shakespeare that recommends it to the lives of young people across all different cultures, all different races, all different ethnicities have been able to respond to that. And I agree with you, Greg. Our teachers have to do a better job reminding kids, first of all, to respect education. The purpose of education is to make you familiar with other cultures, not your own, right? You may know about your culture, but we want to expose you to others. And number two, sit still and have a little faith that before it's said and done, you'll see why this matters to other people. But how do we do that, Greg, when these kids are demanding, without having read the books, that they don't have to? And the response of our universities and colleges seems to be, okay, if you don't want to read it, we won't make you read it.
I think one of the problems is that administrators oftentimes, they try to step in a little bit early and they decide there's a problem in the classroom that we need to deal with top down, whether that means welcoming students into their offices to discuss this after a lengthy sit-in, which is a terrible message to give them, that if you simply try to bring campus to a halt, we'll actually have a meeting with you. It's a better idea, I think, a lot of times for professors to try to deal with this in the classroom there. But, of course, to call on the university if people are coming in squatting in their classes who aren't supposed to be there, if they're disrupting them, to really make the conditions of a meeting clear from the start, that we're not going to respond to threats and to sit-ins and to shout-downs here. There are established procedures in our shared governance to deal with this kind of stuff, to deal with things at a department level, and have regular meetings with students, to use task forces and commissions to actually discuss what the future of the curriculum is going to look like in an orderly fashion, and not just kind of careen from crisis to crisis and decide we're going to change the curriculum because campus shut down for a couple days. That's exactly right. We've got adults, tenured faculty members, lifelong college administrators now, who at the first sign of exclusively leftist protest about the nature of a course or the race of a particular author, they immediately go into CYA mode and concede. The protests draw meetings. The meetings have to produce results. And as we see at Reed College, once the kids get what they want, the first step, then they demand more, right? They want more changes to follow. They're not happy. And then the university has themselves in a position where all they can do is capitulate. I think that's right. The funny thing about Reed was that the students pretty much got what they want. They just didn't get it in the order that they wanted. And so I think it's really instructive for a lot of administrators to see that even with your best intentions, if you try to do something that you think is really going to pacify the students who are trying to bring your campus to a grinding halt. They may say that the way you did it is not good. We want further changes. It becomes really hard to actually have a point of finality where you move forward with a new curriculum, a new way of doing this kind of class. When your students are constantly moving the goalposts on it. And at some point, as an administrator, you need to say, we've engaged with you in good faith. We've met you more than halfway on this. You've pretty much gone outside our procedures, and we're trying to be accommodating to you because we do feel that there is some injustice we need to rectify here. But at some point, administrator is going to say, we've done enough. You're going to have to deal with it. And if you keep raising hell here, there's going to be a disciplinary process for you.
Yeah, I remember at Ohio State University a few years ago, a bunch of kids occupied the vice chancellor's office, one of the main administrative buildings, and the vice chancellor came out and said, we are in the process of gathering your names. We are going to notify your parents. If you are not out of here immediately, we're going to expel you, and then we'll talk. Then we'll talk after that. And within half an hour, all the kids were gone, right? And so I guess from my perspective as a professor, we have got to stop assuming or entitling kids to the belief, college kids, that their wisdom at age 20, their intellect at age 20, their relatively lack of having read and studied at age 20 is enough to grant them a kind of moral authority that they should be able to demand and receive immediately the kind of sweeping changes that colleges are caving into.
Yeah, I mean, the problem, as many people have said before, is that there's often a customer mentality among students today. They feel that they bought an education, they should be able to do whatever they want with it and to kind of change it on the fly, just like they would put together an app or put together a wardrobe. It's something that's supposed to reflect their personal taste, not something that's supposed to really have a profound impact on them and their learning for the rest of their lives. And it's just kind of a problem that a lot of administrators kind of have the same mentality. They're constantly raising tuition. They're spending money on things that don't really have any educational relevance. And they get suckered into this mentality, too, that it's what our customers want. We better do it.
Blame the institution, not the kids. Be sure to stay up on all the latest news and information from the College Fix editors by joining us on all of our social media platforms. Greg Piper, Associate Editor at the College Fix, thank you for this illuminating discussion today. This growing push to remove so-called white authors from the canon sets a number of disturbing precedents. Number one, we are assuming these college kids, we're allowing young college kids who theoretically are going to college at age 19 and 20 to get an education, to learn about history, to read the influential books of Western culture. It goes without saying that the vast majority of these kids are never going to live anywhere other than the United States. They're not going to move out to non-Western cultures. Their whole life will be spent here. And the weird idea that is being predicated here is that all texts are the same texts. You can substitute one text from a so-called white person with one text from a so-called black person. It doesn't really matter what the text is, that all books have equal relative merit, which is also not true, especially when it comes to the influence on the culture you're going to have to spend the rest of your life living in. And finally, and most alarmingly, and most obviously, we're really going to start a trend now where we allow 19 to 21-year-old kids determine what is and isn't read. Reed College lost this debate. They lost it. They gave it away when they allowed these protesters into the classroom, when they gave them permission to sit in another teacher's class and quietly protest. And it didn't start out with them saying anything disruptive, but of course by the end they were. If you're a teacher in that situation, you can't win. Reed College gave the game away. We've got to really start reassessing how we approach college kids. Either they are students who are there to learn and therefore must show some degree of deference for a curriculum, a teaching, a history that universities are committed to transmitting. If not, all you're going to have is kids rewriting the nature of the university experience itself. Why have math class at all? Why require any math class? Math, we've seen many university campuses make the argument, professors make the argument that math, right answers in math or engineering or science, the scientific method is a holdover of white patriarchal logocentrism. Are we going to get to the point real soon where 21-year-old college sophomores are arguing that math is inherently biased because Archimedes was a white guy and therefore we're going to waive all math requirements or substitute a math requirement for a course in black cultural history? How can we stop it when we're already allowing these sorts of things to happen? Let's let universities be universities, and let's return to a situation where students are students, not activists and protesters first. And that's the final fix. I'm Dr. Duke, and we will see you next time. For more videos and original articles, visit thecollegefix.com. And don't forget to like The College Fix on Facebook and follow on Twitter to receive your daily dose of right-minded news and commentary from across the nation.